everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Vanessa and this is Split Reads. Today, this video is going to be all about my favorites of 2025. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my favorite books of the year. I will also be talking about my favorite music albums of the year and some of my favorite documentaries and films that I watched this past year. I hope that you enjoy this video, and without further ado, let's get started. We're definitely going to start with books first, since that's usually what you come to my channel for. I'm mostly going to talk about my favorites of the year, though in every category genre I have definitely honorable mentions. So we will first start with nonfiction honorable mentions, which include American Bulk. This is a book in essays all about basically consumerism in the United States and how it fractures families. It's a very vulnerable look at the author and her nuclear family, and also her grandmother's way of thinking about material goods in their lives. It was very visceral, very vulnerable, very open and honest, which I could not put myself in her shoes to write about my family members like this, and very, very real, because I think the things that she's talking about in this collection of essays is very true to our experience. She has chapters about working at Ulta. She has chapters about shopping at Costco. She talks a lot about what all of these things mean for how you feel like you are successful or accomplished in the world. Another honorable mention is the memoir The House of My Mother by Sherry Franke. It is a look at Sherry Franke talking about her family and growing up with the 8 Passengers YouTube channel. It was a YouTube channel where the mother, Ruby Franke, filmed her family, her Mormon family, and what they got up to in their day-to-day lives. Sherry Franke, the author, does not speak to her mother any longer. In 2023, her mother was charged with child neglect, and it's her kind of figuring out how it was that she was treated as a child because of this YouTube channel and because of the culture that she was a part of, and because of the way that her mother and her father raised her. It is very sad. It is very forthcoming about her experience. It has a few blinders in my opinion, but I think it's still something that I really look for in memoirs, and I think it's a great book. I also really thought that You Didn't Hear This From Me was a really great collection of essays. This one mostly focuses on gossip and how gossip is important to us as creatures in the world. There are chapters in here about Britney Spears. There are chapters in here about the way that people are dissuaded from gossiping in religious circles. Also how we use gossip for trust building, and it just had a lot of really interesting takes to me. I really enjoyed the essays. Another book that is part of my honorable mentions is To Those Who Have Confused You to Be a Person. This is a book that looks into women's experience online, and the author is coming at this from her own perspective and her own lived experience of being harassed online. And it really looks into how online has always been a place where women are second-class citizens. Hard stories to read, but I think that I got to understand each different type of woman and what they've been going through in a way that I found really engaging and worthwhile. And then my last honorable mention is Y2K, a more polarizing book if you read some of the reviews online. I think I just read this book at the exact right time. I read it as inauguration was happening. It's what I needed. I needed to feel some rage. I needed to feel some anger, and I think that this book delivered that. Millennials and I guess older Gen Z are not going to live in a better off world than their parents, and it talks about that from the perspective of capitalist structure that we have, the economy that we have, the politics and the governmental institutions and the leaders that we have. I think that this book is definitely from the perspective of someone who was raised privileged and who I guess the ideas that she had for her life didn't come to fruition, and she expected that they would because of her place in the world and how she was raised. But ultimately what I took most out of this is the interior anger that we all feel sometimes about the status of the world, and sometimes it's just a little cathartic to hear it from people. Now let's talk about my favorite books of the year. Such Great Heights. I ended up really enjoying this book. I think similar to some of my favorite books from last year, it's more pop culture focused, and so it's a little bit lighter than some of my other favorite reads from the year. This book focuses on the indie explosion that happened in the late 90s into the mid 2010s, and how it changed from being being literally things that were independent and like underground to it being like a facade of what indie is and how it became like a misnomer basically. The author does this by looking into different facets of indie music, including like the beginning of indie, indie rock, indie rap, indie pop. A lot of the things that he focuses on are things that I grew up on, and that's why this book appealed to me so much. I also really loved that every chapter started off with like a playlist of the things that he was going to be talking about. A great book if you love music, if you love pop culture, reading about that kind of thing in your nonfiction, definitely put this book on your radar. Words of the State by Claudia Rowe, and this book is a look at the foster care to prison pipeline in the United States. It focuses in particular on like 4 or 5 people with one main female subject that is followed starting at the beginning of the book. How a lot of children that are in foster care end up making really bad choices because of the ways that their brains haven't fully developed and the trauma that they have faced in their families before they were placed in foster care, as well as the like bad experiences that a lot of them have in foster care. It really uses a lot of those different dynamics of like nurture nature, child development, like brain development and attachment styles, and how important that is into creating a human that is capable of going about our world like as self-actualized kind of people, and how a lot of these children didn't have that. If you are someone that likes narrative nonfiction, if you're someone that likes looking at how, like social issues affect people, identity, children, I think that this book is really palpable and interesting. I learned a lot reading this book. There Is No Place for Us. This looks at homelessness, working folks that live in the Atlanta region. Most of this book focuses on families trying to make ends meet. Most of these families are headed by single moms. The majority of the people in this book, maybe all of the people in this book, are also all Black, and it looks at how that affects them in their lives as well. Most of this book focuses on how most of these subjects are working and that they just can't make ends meet even though they are working, how difficult minimum wage jobs are, how like the lack of hours that are available that are not expected or routine affect their livelihood, the ways that they have to travel to work in an area that does not have the like mass transit infrastructure that Atlanta doesn't have, and how that deteriorates like family lines and community ties. In particular, it looks at their housing and how so many things that happen are predatory. There's a lot of talk about basically living out of hotels and how it's like a whole system in Atlanta, but the people that frequent these hotels don't have the tenant rights because they're technically not tenants. The author is like an anthropologist, and I feel like this is a really good ethnography in the vein of Evicted. So if you'd like learning more about, like what people are doing to make ends meet and how difficult that is in today's world, I think that you would find this really interesting. A really tough read. I really thought that it was well done.
I'm upset at myself because I started making this list on my notes app before the year was over, and then I read one of the best books of the year as my last book of the year, and then I forgot to include it in my notes app list. So the book that I will put in this section is definitely Misbehaving at the Crossroads by Honorée Fanone Jeffers. This book is so beautiful, and I really think Jeffers has accomplished something incredible in this work. She mixes essay memoirs, political and historical analysis, as well as poetry and other writings. And it's really raw, it's heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. It's smart and critical. It's really interesting to hear her beliefs. She talks about her religious beliefs, what she thinks about marriage, what she thinks about family, including her father and her mother. And seeing her sift through her family memories, good and bad, her womanist beliefs. She is really contemplating what it is to be a Black woman in America, and a Black woman who is now in her 60s, so she's seen a lot. My last read of 2025, and it was stunning, a stunning read.
The Devil at His Elbow. I really was so enraptured by this book. This book focuses on the South Carolina case of the Murdochs, and it looks at it from a historical point of like the grandfather and how they became such an influential family in South Carolina, how that has passed down through the generations in wealth as well as in the way that they get away with things. The brothers have had run-ins with the law and they never end up paying for any of that. It also focuses on Alex Murdaugh and the ways that he has like decompensated over time due to a substance abuse issue that he has where he has basically pilfered money off of clients for his law firm, and it's pretty horrible. It culminates with like the murders of the mother and one of the sons. It's believed to have been done by Alex Murdaugh. He got convicted. He's in prison. All of these things finally caught up with this family. Also really well done because of the way that the author like lays that all out, including all of that historical stuff. There's so much like financial crimes in here, as well as like just like small town living, like how all of these teenagers are connected to each other. I like completely understood all of the pieces. I could like see the puzzle pieces coming together in a way that I haven't before in any of like the podcasts or documentaries that I've watched on this case. So I think that this book is really like the thing to consume if you're wanting to learn more about this case for sure. I can't wait until the author writes something else. I'm first in line to read that. And last but not least, my favorite nonfiction book that I read in 2025 is Alligator Tears by Edgar Gomez. I really love this memoir and essays. This is a book for the immigrant kids, a book for the Florida kids. This is a book for like dreamers and people who are trying so hard to accomplish their dreams, their creative dreams that are sometimes so far-fetched in an immigrant household. I just found myself like feeling so attached to the narrator of this book. Edgar Gomez really is so vulnerable and open with his story. There are so many essays in here that are relatable to me because of where I grew up and the kinds of things that I saw growing up. It's also just like fun from a perspective of like, you know, working at a flip-flop shop, which is such a Florida thing, you know, trying to make it on YouTube as a beauty influencer, which was such a 2010s thing. And there are also much deeper and sadder stories in here. For example, about the Pulse nightclub shooting. There are stories in here about meeting your estranged father after not seeing him for a very long time, about your immigrant mother's body deteriorating over time because of her menial jobs that she is doing to try to put food on the table, his way of trying to become a writer and how difficult that is, understanding more about his sexuality and letting his mother and his family know about that. Just really beautiful, a book that I cried listening to, feeling just like thankful to be let into someone's life. That's my favorite thing when I read memoirs, is to feel like I'm there and like I understand where they're coming from, where they are giving themselves in a way that's very vulnerable and like hard to do. It's like hard to let people see the real you. This was definitely a lovely book that I won't forget for a long time. I would recommend this for people who loved How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. I got very similar feelings that I had reading that book when I read Alligator Tears. Let's talk a little bit about fiction, which I only have one book, and I have honorable mentions that I want to talk about. I enjoyed Annie Bot. I talked about that in my last video. A really good sci-fi book looking into what it's like to be a woman in today's world. I thought it posed good questions. I thought that the book moved quickly and I really appreciated that. I don't read very many sci-fi books and I enjoyed this like literary sci-fi take on robots and AI. I also thought that Penance was really well done. It made me want to pick up more books by this author, who I've tried before but never read a full book from. I thought that Penance looked into the teenage girl outlook in a way that felt very real, especially if you grew up with 2010s Tumblr. Those are very like very specific niche topics, so I feel like this book is probably not for everyone, but it was definitely for me. A book that was kind of opposite, a little bit more lighthearted in tone and comedic, is Good Material. I really enjoyed my time with this book. I don't often read from male main character points of view or perspectives, and I thought that this one was well done. It felt realistic in how so many friend groups change as people start having families and getting married, and what happens to like friends who feel like they're being kind of left behind. It also shows you like how you view a relationship is not necessarily how like both partners in that relationship lived that relationship. I also thought Wild Dark Shore was really well done. Climate novel about a changing world, a family, and trying to survive. The best thing that this book did, in my opinion, in the writing is make you feel like you were there. I definitely felt like I was like breathing this air. I was a part of this like small house where they're all kind of like on top of each other. A book that was hyped and I think lived up mostly. Another book, and I'm like chuckling already because it was that kind of book, is Rejection by Tony Tolifemuti. This book is wild. This book is disturbing. I chuckled a lot reading this book, and in a way where I was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, listening to, reading. So many of the people in these short stories are strange, wrong, morally gray, or morally just not even gray, just morally not it. I was just really captivated by the storytelling in here, by the things that they got up to and how it relates to our real world and how people act in our real world who feel at the edges of society that don't feel like they fit in, and what some of them do. And last but not least, my favorite fiction book that I read in 2025 is Rental House. I feel pretty alone in this take. Mostly what did this, like I said in previous videos, is the narrator for the audiobook, who did a fantastic job at having like ways that made them come alive in the audiobook. This is a book about a couple who is married but don't have children, where they're at in their careers in like their late 30s or so, how they relate to their parents as their parents are starting to age. I think so many of these conversations are interesting to millennials. I feel like some of the things that are happening in this book are relatable, or at least they were relatable to me. A lot of other conversations about, you know, just like the fracturing that we have in our society when it comes to science, when it comes to politics. Some of those conversations were really interesting to me, and that's why it ended up becoming my favorite book, my favorite fiction book of 2025. As far as kids books, I enjoyed quite a lot of kids books that I read this year. I really enjoyed Lucky Broken Girl, which I finally got to. It's like a newer classic, and I thought that was a really good historical one. I enjoyed The Year of Billy Miller, which is a really good realistic fiction. It's really mundane, but that's the kind of stuff I love to read in middle grade, is like how families are with each other and how young kids are like navigating their world. I thought Frindle was really funny, a book that I hadn't read, you know, in my childhood, and I think holds up. I think it's still good. Millie is another book from a series that I've been reading. If you love dog stories, which I do, I think that this series is really awesome, and Millie was, you know, par for the course. Really good. I really enjoyed for YA Sunrise on the Reaping. I thought it was a good follow-up. And I also really enjoyed Chlorine Sky by Mahogany L. Browne. Really good novel and verse if you're into that kind of a thing, into realistic fiction. And then my favorite two kids books that I've read, number 2 is Felix Powell Boy Dog by Erin Entrada Kelly, one of my favorite middle grade authors. She is now really getting into the foray of like younger kids fiction. I really loved Felix Powell Boy Dog. Yeah, there's dogs in the book, and there are other animal characters that take a big part in the story, but mostly it was because of how the boy is portrayed in the book and how imaginative he is, how real that felt to how kids are to me. Just like the way he thinks, imagines, plays, I think was to a T how kids actually are. So my number 1 favorite middle grade book is All the Blues in the Sky by Renee Watson, a book that made me cry, a book that made me feel all the feelings. It's a grief novel in verse about a friend who has lost her friend due to an accident, a hit and run. It's just so profound, lovely, vulnerable, sweet. We are all connected, and we all go through that experience, or we will all go through that experience at some point of losing someone. Very beautiful book, a book that made me cry, and a book that I won't forget for a long time. Let's talk about graphic novels and memoirs. I really enjoyed a lot of the graphic books that I ended up reading this year. Let's talk about my honorable mentions. One is Never Again Will I Visit Auschwitz. This is a book that looks into the author-illustrator's family history with the Holocaust and how his relatives moved to the United States. It uses a lot of like things that have been written down or interviews that have been like televised, as well as the author's experience actually visiting Auschwitz. How strange it is to feel like the influencer culture is looking at that place and like photographing that place. I learned a lot about his family history, his feelings about it. I also have Feeding Ghosts in my honorable mention. This was a very hyped book. This is an intergenerational story. It's a really thick and dense graphic nonfiction work. It was still something where I learned a lot about Chinese history, how intergenerational trauma has moved through this family. They tell stories to survive and what kinds of things they do to survive. And last but not least, for my last honorable mention is another Kyung-suk Gendry Kim book, and that is Dog Days. Dog Days is about moving to a countryside town and how people treat dogs differently there than in the city, and how the author tries to change the view of dogs in this new town that she's in, and like her balance of wanting to be truthful of what she's witnessing but also caring for how she is portraying her people. Really appreciated the afterword, and I love how much she cares about dogs. I feel very similarly. Last but not least, let's talk about my top 3 books in the graphic novel and memoir category. My number 3 is Woman, Life, Freedom. It's edited by Marjane Satrapi. It actually features illustrations from a variety of illustrators from all over the world. It talks about the Iranian protests that have been going on. I think this is even like culminating more right now because they were dissipated for a couple years and now they're back. This focuses on mostly the ones that happened in 2022. The kind of like starting point of the protests in that year, a woman was murdered because she wasn't wearing her hijab properly. How men and women stood up against that, stood up to authoritarian rule and like violence that is thrust upon them, as well as like economic uncertainty and how many people in Iran have left for a better life and how that has changed what Iran is like because they are losing so much creative force, intellect, like ideas because they are moving elsewhere. A lot of these stories are very difficult to read, definitely, but they left a big imprint in my body, my soul. I cried reading these stories and just learning the names of the people that have been murdered, what it's like living there, and feeling the injustice of what they're going through. My number 2 favorite graphic memoir was Gaytheist. This is a really fascinating coming of age tale of an Orthodox Jewish boy who grew up in New York and how as he grew up he realized that he was gay and how that's not accepted in his religion and in particular with his mom and dad. Over time he stopped practicing his religion and he views his religion mostly like a cult. He no longer practices, he doesn't even communicate with his family. I think he's like no contact. I thought that it was a great story if you like learning about people's life stories, their memoirs in a way that's illustrated. I think it was well done. It was one of those books that made me like Google things and try to look things up just because I don't have a lot of background context of what this religion is like. Last but not least, my favorite graphic novel of the year is Girl Juice. It's probably of no surprise to you. I am a Benji Nate big fan and I think that they produce really amazing work. They've gotten better over time. This book is hilarious. This book is light. It was like an antidote to all of the like stressors in the world and all of the like dark things that I typically read. That's why it has like ingrained itself as the best graphic work that I read in 2025. This book is about a group of friends, roommates that live in a house together and how they're all good friends with each other. They're different from each other. They just get into absurd situations and I think that it's a really, really funny book. The illustrations and the like color palettes are like right up my alley. All right, let's talk about my favorite films of the year. I wanted to just kind of like mention them. I track them, but I don't really write reviews. I really liked Weapons. Amazing. I thought that it was really captivating. It was a movie that I watched in theaters. I was scared. I was thrilled. I was like thinking more deeply about what the things might mean that are happening in the story, and I think that it was a really well done like horror thriller town drama. I finally watched Anora. It's like the ride of Uncut Gems, which is a movie that is so like a wild ride that I enjoy, with the more like deep thinking of what this life is like for all parties involved. I also watched Sinners, and that was also really, really great. I kind of wish that it had less of the fantasy aspect of it, but I really loved the like setting of it, the storytelling, the way everything kind of happened in one location, and also like the way that your heart is racing as like things are happening. And then last but not least, another film that I really enjoyed is One Battle After Another, another one that I watched in theaters, and I was very skeptical that I would sit through such a long movie and not have bad things to say about it because I hate long movies. I'm the type of person that will watch movies in 45-minute chunks. But I sat through that whole thing and I was like completely engrossed. Everything just like flowed so well that it didn't feel like a long movie. The plot developed in ways that I don't necessarily think that it was perfect, but just like getting there was so fascinating. I think that the characters are so interesting, and the way that they all like played off of each other also was really, really amazing. Let's talk about documentaries. One that was really well done is One Night in Idaho, The College Murders, which is on Amazon Prime. I was looking forward to because it has cooperation from the families. They wanted to be a part of this, and you get to know so much more about the families that were involved, what their grief and time after the fact has been like. It is done by Liz Garbus, who is one of my favorite documentary filmmakers. I think that she always really focuses on the victim stories. Another documentary that was really well done is The Perfect Neighbor, which is on Netflix. So harrowing, so dark. The like found footage aspect of it is I think what makes it so harrowing and hard to watch. When I started watching it, I didn't really know very much about it. I was just like, this is Florida. Like this is where I went to college. And lo and behold, it was like 45 minutes south of where I went to college. This is a documentary film about tensions between neighbors, in particular two neighbors. A horrible woman who is constantly perturbed by children playing outside and constantly calling police on them in ways that like escalate the tensions. The neighbor shoots one of her other fellow neighbors and she dies, and she is a mother with children. The police body camera footage of all of that happening. So that's basically how it is told just by the found footage. It's a very like gripping and scary way to see how this unfolded, but also a way that like shows the real true thing of what was happening and not just like recollections from people as they're sat down to be interviewed. After I was done, I was like, I need to follow up and see what's happening with this person. Like, are they still in prison? And yeah, considering like how many things in Florida are, you know, right to defend yourself, stand your ground, blah, blah, blah. I'm like thankful for the way that this finished. I feel so bad for those children. And then last but not least, the best documentary series that I watched was The Yogurt Shop Murders. This is a new to me director, Margaret Brown, and I think that also very much like the One Night in Idaho one, looks into how the families and the community has lived through this after the fact. It's not really about finding the people who did it and like psychoanalyzing why they did what they did. That's not what I look for when I watch documentaries. It's more about like seeing where the families and the victims are at, like how they're being supported or not supported enough. Police work and like things that police didn't do or did do that affects the case. It also looks into how the true crime community have proliferated in ways that are detrimental to the case sometimes, and I found that really fascinating, how some families like lean towards like sleuths and how some families are like disgusted by them. These murders happened to these girls at a yogurt shop in Texas, and it mostly focuses on a mother and a sister, how they've lived through this for the past, I don't know, like decades, what the town has been like since that. Unbeknownst to like the documentary filmmakers, after this came out, there was more that came to light about who did this, and hopefully that has like settled a lot of the people that this documentary focuses on in a way that is helpful to their grieving. Now let's talk about my best albums of 2025. This list has really like fluctuated in the last few days. I feel like I moved things from 4 to number 3, from like 6 to number 9. Like it just keeps going up and down, but this is what it is today. First, I want to preface this by saying that I love listening to pop music. I love electropop in particular, and like hyper pop. I like experimental pop and like bubblegum pop. Those are my favorite genres probably. Number 10 is Period by Kesha, and I really enjoyed this like back to form Kesha. She seems like lighter and happier and independent, and I really like that. My favorite songs from the album are Boy Crazy. Like that was my song of the summer in 2025. And Red Flag. I really enjoy Cathedral. Like the slower songs are also really great. I will say this was the best concert that I attended in 2025. I saw her in an amphitheater in Virginia Beach, and it was like the night of my life. I had so much fun. I had amazing seats. I went by myself and loved it. I had amazing views for like the amount of money that I paid, and like getting in and out of that amphitheater was like the best experience. I think that added to like how much I enjoyed this album after the fact. Like I listened to it a lot before I went to the concert, but then after the fact, I was just like nonstop Kesha and period. And also all of the songs that came out, the bonus tracks for the deluxe version, I also really enjoyed. Number 9 on my list is That's Showbiz Baby by Jade. I'm really happy that Jade has come out with her album after so many delays, and it really lived up to my expectations of it. It is really fun, experimental pop. I really enjoy the songs It Girl. It Girl is probably my favorite. I really enjoy Plastic Box. I really enjoy Fantasy, and I'm so excited to see like what comes next for her. I think she has really good vision, and I really enjoyed this album front to back. Number 8 on my list is Smoochie by Eshniko. I was really looking forward to this album because I love these singles so much. The singles are ultimately my favorite still, including Smoochie and Trinkets. I do have tickets to go see her. I feel like she is going to be like a performer, like really over the top, and her outfits. Number 7 on my list is Black Star by Amare. I really fell in love with this album. It's very clubby and very trancey. The way that a lot of the songs are very like repetitive and make you want to dance. Really love a dance album. My favorite songs from this album are Fine Shit and Girly Pop. Yes, definitely an artist that I want to get more into. Number 6 on my list is Salvation by Rebecca Black. Yes, that Rebecca Black. I really enjoyed her 2023 release, and I was really looking forward to this release. It's a really short album, which I wish it was a few tracks longer, but my favorite songs are Tears in My Pocket, Do You Even Think of Me, and American Doll. I think a lot of her songwriting is focused on being a girl in today's world. I just really love the soundscapes that are happening in her songs. Another person that I've seen in concert and really enjoyed how campy and silly she is. She doesn't take herself seriously, and her dancers are really fun. Number 5 on my list is I Love My Computer by Nina Geraci. If you love like glitchy EDM dance pop that focuses on kind of like that digicore like music of the computer and how the computer affects us, I really love iPod Touch. I really love F My Computer and Delete Info Hazard. I love that this album, you can start from the beginning and it just like plays flawlessly through to the end. That's some of my favorite album listening experiences. Some of my favorite albums are like that, like Renaissance by Beyonce, for example. Definitely someone that I have like on my list of people I want to see live for sure. Number 4 on my list is Midnight Sun by Sarah Larson. I saw Sarah Larson in 2024. A lot of her talking out loud in the concert that time was about the election because it was so close, and because the concerts that I go to are in DC now. And so yeah, I just like have memories of her basically saying like vote for Kamala. Since then, so many things have changed for Sarah, and I feel like she's really trying hard to create viral moments that are really fun. I'm rooting for her. I'm really rooting for her. I got tickets for her next concert, and it's at a bigger venue than the last one, and it's already all sold out, so go Sarah. I think she's an amazing vocalist. I've really enjoyed all her stuff since I've been in like college. I really enjoyed Midnight Sun. I loved Girls Girl. I love Crush. I really enjoy the last track, Puss Puss, as well. Number 3 on my list is Addison by Addison Rae, another person that I've been anticipating like the release of an album just because of her connections to the artists that I listen to, including, you know, her doing songs with Arca, her doing songs with Charlie XCX. I enjoy the fact that she works with a really small woman team for this album. A lot of bass, like soft vocals. It's not really about the singing, it's about like the music and how the production works. I really enjoy Money Is Everything. I really enjoyed New York. I love Fame Is a Gun, and my favorite song off of Addison, as well as my number 1 track for Apple Music for 2025 was High Fashion, which definitely deserves more praise than it gets. My number 2 album of 2025 is Debí Tirar Más Fotos by Bad Bunny. I'm so excited for the Super Bowl halftime show. I think he'll do a great job, and I'm really curious what he's gonna do with it. This was what Apple Music said it was my number 1 album of 2025. I listened to it so much at the beginning of the year, like through spring, And I mean, I had moments in the summertime when I was listening to it as well as the fall. It speaks to so much of my childhood, like the sounds that it plays with, that it goes back and forth on, are some of the things that like I grew up listening to. And so I love like how that blends with like his reggaeton normal style that he's known for. It really has like a touching feeling to it where it's like an album for all generations. My favorite songs, my number one favorite song is Close Friends for sure. I just can listen to that song like nonstop. It just does things to me. There's like one part in the song where he's like, Peli Negro Blondie, and that part I like love it. I just love like how he switches his voice up in that part, the melody to it. I also really love Perfumito Nuevo. I love like the breakdown at the end of the song where you feel like the song is over but then it's not. And I also love Baile Inolvidable. My number one favorite album, Fancy That / Fancy Some More by Pink Pantheress. This album, I feel like when it first came out, it like slipped me by. I listened to a couple songs, but I didn't listen to the full album. And then when Fancy Some More came out, I couldn't stop listening to it. I like listened to it back to back to back to back. And then I went back to Fancy That as well and listened to it because the whole point of it is that Fancy Some More is like remixes with different musicians. So she has like multiple people on the same tracks, on different tracks. So it's just like reimaginings of the original. And my favorite songs are Stateside. That's my number one. I love Stateside, and especially the Sarah Larson version. I love Stars, and that one has Ives as a feature, and so good. I also was really into Ives this year, singles that they've put out, and I also really love Noise with JT. It's just so like loud, rambunctious, like fun, lighthearted. That's definitely my number one album of the year. I listen to it so much. This is another one that really plays well from beginning to end as like one full thing. It's such a short album, but it feels like you've had a full meal by the end of it. I love that she produces all of her stuff as well, and I just can't wait what else she's gonna get up to. I also have tickets to see her in concert. She was supposed to open for Olivia Rodrigo when I saw Olivia Rodrigo live, and then she didn't. So I've just been waiting for my turn to see Pink Pantheress live. I feel like she's gathering herself more as a performer and live performer in particular, and so I'm excited to see what that will be like. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video and figuring out some of the best things that I watched, listened to, read in the past year. I hope that I will see you again in my next video. Bye bye!